And then we moved the crew up to the Rye Project, which is near the northern end of the North Canal Highway in Yukon, and started drill testing the Rye Project. Our geologist out there, Jack Morton, who's our VP, he was doing backflips after seeing some of the initial holes. So, we had to get some of that out to the public, right? And let people know what we were seeing, because people were just so excited on site. So basically, what we saw was, we're hitting big sections of sheeted quartz veining, and so looking for these big reduced intrusion related gold systems. That's exactly what you're hoping to find. If the holes that we see, are as good as we hope that they are, then I'm sure there's going to be lots more interest. I mean, basically, as soon as we put that news release out, my phone started lighting up with people, asking to give us funding. So it's not hard in this belt to look for analogs of successes, right? And I think everybody sees that. And so, yeah, the timing of making a brand new discovery for Trifecta really couldn't be better in terms of the gold price. So now it's really just my job to get this story out to a broader audience, so that when we get our drill results, that we've got enough eyes on our story that we can advance this thing aggressively.
For disclosure purposes, our site does not make recommendations for purchases or sale of stocks, services, or products. Nothing on our site or this podcast should be construed as an offer or solicitation to buy or sell products or securities. All investing involves risk and possible losses. This podcast is for entertainment purposes only. For disclosure purposes, Trifecta Gold is a paid-for advertisement on the Exploring Mining podcast and InvestorIdeas.com. Richard, it's great to have you back on the show. Very busy summer for Trifecta. Do you want to just go over a quick update of what's been going on with Mount Hinton and your Rye project this summer?
The idea this summer was we were going to get out and do some initial drill tests of a couple of our targets in the Tombstone Gold Belt. So we're working up in the Yukon, where there's been over 17 million ounces of gold found in this belt since 2020. And we've got a big package of targets, really exciting. So we did an initial drill test looking for an intrusion on Mount Hinton. Got some interesting sniffs, it looks like, in the drill core. Didn't tag into an intrusion, but seen some interesting minerals that suggest we're getting closer to a heat source. So we're waiting on assays for that to help guide that. And then we moved the crew up to the Rye Project, which is near the northern end of the North Canal Highway in Yukon, and started drill testing the Rye Project, more out on the eastern end of the belt. And our geologist out there, Jack Morton, who's our VP, he was doing backflips after seeing some of the initial holes. So, we had to get some of that out to the public, right? And let people know what we were seeing, because people were just so excited on site. So basically, what we saw was, we're hitting big sections of sheeted quartz veining, and so looking for these big reduced intrusion related gold systems. That's exactly what you're hoping to find. And so we've got a big pluton that's mapped there. That's the right age. We're drilling sort of right along the margins of that pluton. In the pluton and in the surrounding Hornfels rocks that are like right adjacent to it. So you can host deposits of this style either in the pluton or in the surrounding rocks. They usually occur right at the margins of these plutons. And there's lots of examples of deposits in our belt that are both developed in the intrusions, like Snowline Gold, for example, now has a $1.5 billion market cap. The formerly producing Victoria Gold, they were all in intrusions. Same with all the deposits that Sitka Gold is putting together. They've got a couple million ounces in the belt as well that are in the intrusion. And then you've got plays like Banyan Gold, where they've got 7 million ounces developed above an intrusion. So a lot of the mineralization, I think, that we see probably in that first hole would be more similar to the setting that would be at Banyan, where you're seeing a lot of that pyrrhotite, other sulfide minerals, whereas lower down in our hole 3, we were hitting sheeted veining right in the intrusion. So in our first phase drilling at Rye, we're doing huge step outs. So I mean, if you look at the distance between our hole 1 and hole 3, that's over 500 meters. So you could fit a couple deposits in between those holes. So the fact that we're seeing sheeted veining in both settings is very encouraging on a first pass. We're trying to do some big step outs and get a sense of what this larger system looks like. We've got a hole currently underway that's even further south than anything we've announced, that's actually colored in the intrusion. And then after that one, we've got a drill site now built that we're going to be undercutting our hole 1, just based on the density of veining we saw in hole one. We had, I think it was about a 225-meter intersection where we had over 25 veins per meter was sort of how they were reporting it. We don't have any assays yet. The core is getting shipped down to Whitehorse for processing, and then it'll get shipped off to the lab. So we're probably a month to 2 months out still from any assays, but the visuals looked quite promising. So we had to let people know what we were seeing, and the stock responded nicely. We've got about another week or two to wrap up that program, and then basically just waiting for assays.
Can you talk a little bit about some of your findings? I think from your rock samples from Rye Project, there was like a one that was 21.1 grams per ton or something wild like that.
So part of our first phase, so as soon as Jack got out there with a smaller team of geos, they went to a lot of the areas that we found last year where we had some good mappers out, and they found areas with higher densities of sheeted veining. So when we sent the economic geologists out there this summer, really to try to prioritize, where should we be drill testing this? And so they were basically taking surface samples from the areas that we saw the highest densities of that veining. So a lot of those surface samples are basically, just vein specimen type samples that were from surface. So we know that, we've got gold in the system. Reading through a lot of the logs, a lot of those samples are, associated with the arsenopyrite, which we do see in drill core in the veins that we're drilling. We haven't seen any visible gold to date, but we have seen scheelite, which is one of the key indicator minerals for gold in some of the systems in the belt. I know the guys at Sitka Gold have been using the UV lights to basically lamp their core. That helps them, identify where the scheelite is, and then you can, you look in more detail in there, and that's where they've been able to find a lot of their good grades. So, we do see that in abundance, especially in that first hole. So, we don't know what kind of gold grades we're going to have, but we know there's gold in the system, and we know we're hitting lots of sheet veining. So, as a first pass, like I said, a lot of really broad step outs, and then we're looking to come in next year with a larger program to drill around where we get the best results from this year. But yeah.
Well, the market definitely reacted well to your press release out on Rye Project. Can you talk a little bit for investors that might have missed the first podcast that we did about your two projects, Mount Hinton and Rye? And then do you want to talk about some of the differences between the two of them?
Yeah, so there's sort of a large belt of intrusion related projects that are in Yukon, and the Mount Hinton is out on the west side of that belt, is thought to be sort of the central, or have the central heat pump for the big mineral system that's in that district. And so Hecla's mining there currently. They've got over 200 million ounces of silver historical production. I think they've got somewhere in the neighborhood of 70 million ounces in resource still of silver. And Mount Hinton is the more gold rich part of that system. So that vein system that's on the Hecla's mining extends onto the Mount Hinton ground. It's all the veins we see there are much more gold rich. So our thinking there was that we're in the hotter part of the system, and that there was an intrusive center driving that mineralization. So our program out there was designed to test one of the geophysical anomalies that we found in 2024 to see if that was representative of a possible heat source. And so that's still a work in progress on that project. There's the vein potential on Hinton is still there. We did a little bit of trenching and mapping and surface sampling on the veins there this summer that we'll have maybe some numbers to come out later on this summer once we get assays. But the focus there was looking for the intrusion, and the reason is that you've seen companies like Snowline Gold is really the best example, where they're a microcap company like us, and they tapped into one of these bulk tonnage type systems. And it's really these big reduced intrusion systems. You're able to build ounces with less drill meters than if you're going after veins. And so that's really the push from our investors, is to look for one of these bulk tonnage systems. And they say, like the veins at Hinton, they're worth there's a lot of value there, but just where the market's at today, the focus is finding these bulk tonnage systems. And so that was what we were testing for at Hinton. Like I said, we hit some diking in that second hole, so some signs of a nearby intrusion. But going out to the eastern end of the belt, where the Rye project is, that one there, where we've got an intrusion that comes right to surface. So it's not that we're looking at geophysical features and trying to interpret them and guess, okay, what could be causing this anomaly. It's the big geophysical anomaly that's at Hinton. That's at the Rye. We can see the rocks coming to surface, so we know that, okay, yes, it is actually these rocks that are causing that anomaly. And yeah, lo and behold, well, we've got some nice looking rocks in the first couple of drill holes. So yeah, we're definitely very excited because we saw how quickly Snowline went from a micro cap company to they're now a few years into their exploration campaign at the Rogue, and they're now $1.5 billion company. They've obviously found one of the nicest gold deposits in the world. So that's sort of the top of what you're shooting for. But there's a lot of other deposits that have been found in the belt, and those guys are still commanding multiple hundreds of $1 million market caps. And so Trifecta is still here sitting around 20 million. So I think there's still a lot of upside potential for our stock at this point. I mean, we did a restructuring very recently to acquire this property package, so the company's still very tightly held. We've got over 30% with insiders, and then we have two other groups that have 9.9% share positions, and they're all capable of writing large checks to help support our exploration campaigns moving forward as we move this from what appears to be a brand new discovery. So we've got a little bit of a re-rate from, say, the 10 to 20 million range. As we start to define this a little bit more with more drill holes and people can recognize, hey, this is going to be a deposit, then we'd expect, the next re-rate. And then, you start defining your deposit and hopefully, it's looking economic, and then you're up into the next category. So just really trying to do this in a systematic fashion. And, we're obviously really happy with the inaugural program so far. So, a few more holes to come to give us a bit more idea of what the system looks like further into the intrusion and then further at depth underneath some of that hornfels, and see if in that hole one, the theory is that is sitting above the intrusion as well. So is the second hole that we're going to undercut, are we going to be still in the hornfels hitting the same kind of rocks, or are we going to be an underlying intrusion? Like, there's a lot to learn from this program still to come. So
Obviously, the market reacted the most to your Rye project. So, when those assay results and everything, you have a better gauge of what you're doing. Is that, as you move forward, really going to be the target you spend the most time with? Or are you going to build out both slowly? Or what are your thoughts for like how you want to build that story out long term?
yeah, I mean, right now I would say that the focus would be the Rye. I mean, pretty much the game plan that we had coming into this year, I think we're still sticking with that, right? It was go out, do some initial drill tests on a couple targets, and then focus our efforts on what everyone was responding the best to those initial efforts. And so far, just from only going off of visuals, because we don't have assays from either project, it seems as though the Rye is responding the best. And so, yeah, that's definitely going to be the focus. Yes. On my way down to Colorado next week to the Precious Metal Summit to try to get this story out to as many investors as I can, because I think we're still flying quite under the radar compared to a lot of our competitors in the belt.
Once these assays and everything come in, are you going to look that you need to raise capital, or are you fully funded to go into drilling program for next year? Or
yeah, so coming out of this exploration season, we're still going to have north of a couple $1 million of flow through in the treasury. So that's more than enough to get a program going. With if the holes that we see are as good as we hope that they are, then I'm sure there's going to be lots more interest. I mean, basically, as soon as we put that news release out, my phone started lighting up with people asking to give us funding. So I don't think it's not hard in this belt to look for analogs of successes, right? And I think everybody sees that, and so yeah, the idea would be just to keep ramping this up. I mean, we're at the point now where we've got the money in the bank to complete our earn-in. And that's, I guess, really one of the beautiful things about this option deal we have to acquire these projects is that we've got to spend $6 million to earn in the first 70%. And but that 6 million is earmarked, doesn't have to be earmarked in any specific project. It was just on all the projects in this package that we're acquiring. And so we can basically just follow wherever the results are the best. And so that's where we want to spend the money. And so we've got that cash already in treasury to earn in. So, like, definitely it's in the industry where, we basically get out there and spend money. So we're always looking for more exploration dollars to expand our programs. But yeah, based on the response I had after these initial holes, I don't think that'll be an issue to do an expanded program next year, beyond what we already have in the treasury.
with gold, obviously, again, looks like it's breaking out. It feels like the right time for a gold discovery story. I know we don't have a crystal ball here, but do you want to just talk a little bit about like the valuation of what the potential is for Trifecta with the discovery?
It's pretty incredible being at this gold price. The majors now are pumping out a lot of cash, and so the thinking, and I think in our industry, is that they're going to have to start going shopping now, and they're going to start buying some of these deposits that have been defined in the last little while, and then that just starts bringing a lot more capital back into our space. And so, yeah, the timing of making a brand new discovery for Trifecta really couldn't be better in terms of the gold price. So now it's really just my job to get this story out to a broader audience, so that when we get our drill results, that we've got enough eyes on our story that we can advance this thing aggressively.
For just listeners that maybe missed the first podcast, just talk about the team that's in place because I feel like that's quite important because you guys have quite a great technical team and some good background as far as building out discovery stories.
Yeah, so our group has been active in the Yukon really since the 60s. Some of the guys that are still on the advisory committees and whatnot, and myself and Jack have been working up in the Yukon. Jack's my VP and we've been working up there since 2005. So 20 years just even for some of the young guns that are in this deal now. And our team was involved in the discovery of both of the highest grade greater than 1 million ounce gold deposits in Yukon. Uh, so that's a lot of the work with the Archer Cathro group. They do work with other companies now in the belt, but that's sort of a lot of the key geologic mines sort of came out of there, and that's where a lot of our project package came sort of from the work that Archer Cathro and Strategic Metals have done in Yukon over the years. That's really how we've been able to amass a lot of our initial claim positions. Uh, on our technical advisory board, Rob Karn, he was a former partner of Archer Cathro. He's on our technical advisory committee there. He was a former president of Attack Resources. When they found the Osiris discovery, a whole belt of Carlin deposits in the Yukon. Award-winning discoveries there. We've got Moira Smith on our technical advisory board. She's also got lots of experience in this Tombstone Gold Belt, having co-authored a lot of the papers on reduced intrusion systems. Some of her work in the belt was focused on some projects in the offset in Alaska, because this same belt of intrusions actually doesn't go over into Alaska. She's got a lot of work on the Pogo system over there, as well as other sort of off-trend large deposits down in Nevada. So she's very well-known geologist. One of our 20% shareholder is a Condire Investors. So they're a large fund based out of Dallas, and one of their key technical advisors is Fred Graybeal. And so he was the chief geologist with the Sarco. And so, another huge wealth of knowledge that also sits on our technical advisory committee. So, aside from our, boots on the ground relationships with, Archer Cathro and that team that's got the track record of discovery and efficient exploration in Yukon, we've got, a lot of people with, huge lists of discoveries behind their names that are lending us their wisdom to try to help guide our programs. And it's seems to be working out fairly well so far. So definitely glad to have this team behind me.
Do you want to just quickly run over a little bit of the financial structure again, and then some of you have Crescat Capital. I know some amazing people behind you as far as on the stock side for investors that are looking just at the share structure and people behind it.
Last year, I guess I'll step back a little bit, because last year we did sort of our restructure of the company and an initial kind of seed round at and got out, started to do some initial work, set things up for drill programs this year, and then this summer we were able to bring in Crescat on a 9.9% basis. They've invested in a lot of the companies in the belt and had success. And once we ran Quentin Henney through a lot of our data, he said, you guys have to try to get a drill onto that Rye project. That was really the impetus of them investing in the company. And so, another win for those guys, I think, so far, based on our visuals. And then also the other secondary, or not secondary, but sorry, the second 9.9% investor that came in was Alex Gubbins. So, a well-known mining investor out of Peru. Again, is a big shareholder of Snowline, Rackla, a number of the other companies in the belt. And then I'd already mentioned Condire. They've got one of their managing partners on our board. We've got some of their guys on our technical advisory committee. So, between those three investors, that's 40% of the shares of the company right there. And they're all represent very large funds. So, for a company the size of with the market cap of Trifecta to acquire, I think that caliber of investors probably speaks quite heavily to the geologic backing that we have. So, yeah, I mean that really opens up our ability to raise capital as we move forward to advance this is having that good share registry. With insiders still own over 10%, and none of that stock came from seed stock either. I mean, it was all purchased out of the open market or private placements or warrant exercises. I mean, after the Crescat and financing their earlier this year, we had a number of warrants come in. They got exercised. That topped up our hard dollar treasury. So, like I said, we'll have over 2 million of flow through at the end of this season, and probably still over 1 million of hard. So, the company is still in really good financial shape moving forward.
Everything is in perfect alignment for a fantastic fall for Trifecta. Richard, it's always a pleasure. Do you want to have any closing remarks for investors? I know you did just under 800 meters for Mount Hinton, and it's 2,000 for Rye Project, or am I?
Yeah, I mean, it sort of depends on drill productivity. I think we're definitely going to be over the 1,500 meters at Rye, just based on sort of where we were at the last couple of days. And so it's just, finishing up this hole in the intrusion and then stepping down, drilling our hole under hole one, and basically just have to get out of there, within the next, 9 days. I guess we'll be out. We'll be demobbed by mid-September under our current permit. So it's just as much as we can get done up until that time. So.
Well, fantastic. Is there any conferences besides Beaver Creek that investors can find you at or follow you?
Well, yeah, I guess in September I'll be down to Beaver Creek and then back up to Vancouver. I'll head by the Metals Investor Forum there. I've got a number of investors there. I mean, John Kaiser's been writing us up as well as one of his picks. So a good following with that group of investors. So I'll go touch base with a number of people there as well in September, and then yeah, still in the schedule, but November's the Yukon Geoscience is a big one for all the Yukon companies and really everybody getting back together, and there's the big community events up there as well with the various First Nations. So that sort of rounds out our fall, but there's obviously a few other conferences in November we might be able to add to the schedule given the results that are starting to come out of the field for us. So we'll keep people updated as more events come onto the schedule.